Zoo and Aquarium. My name is Sophie. I'm one of the giraffe keepers here, and today I have the pleasure of inviting you along to our lunch feed with our giraffe family. So behind me you can see our big bull Shaba. He's our 10-year-old male that's father to all our calves that we managed to breed here at National Zoo. And just behind him you can see Mzungu, who is his girlfriend, also just turned 10 years of age. So 10 years old for these guys puts them at about middle-aged. These guys have been together for the last 6 years, and we acquired them specifically here at the National Zoo and Aquarium to be part of the Australasian breeding program for giraffes, which we are very successful at doing, or should I say they are very successful at doing. Behind Mzungu you may be able to see their current calf. He's sitting down having his lunch, sleep at the moment. His name is Kamizi and he was born last October. So he is almost about to turn 1 year of age, which is around the time that they start to wean off mum's milk. So he has doubled in his height since he was born. They're born at around 1.8 meters tall and he's currently just over 3 meters. So these guys are having their lunch feed, as I mentioned. They are basically cows on stilts, if you think of it that way, with their digestive system. They are ruminants, so they eat their food, then they take it down to their stomach, their first chamber, and then they bring it back up again shortly afterwards for another chew, or a ruminate, as we call it. So you'll often see a big ball of food going down the neck, all the way down into the stomach, and then you'll hear a bit of a belch, and it will come back up again for a re-chew. So these guys, being ruminants, they eat pretty much all day long. So we spend most of our day providing food for these guys and preparing their next meal and trying to provide it in different ways for them as well. So underneath Shaba's mouth you may see a big green bowl that's full of lucerne hay, and that's what Mzungu is also eating behind him. And on top of the lucerne they get the browse, which is the leaves that Shaba's eating. So we feed them a minimum of 4 times a day, and we set them up with a big portion of food for the night time as well to keep them occupied and eating. It's really important that they constantly have food in their digestive system and to ruminate with as well. And they get small treat food that we use for training purposes or any conditioning that we need to do with these guys. And for this herd they love their pellets, so they get a small amount of pellets in the morning and a small amount in the evening as well. Behind them you might be able to see their big green barn underneath Shaba's neck there. So the tallest building at the back, that is their night area. So in the evening we bring them in there and they get access to their dinner food. They've got some nice beds and some heaters in there to keep them warm in Canberra winter, and they can choose to be inside or out depending on what they feel like. Mzungu is normally kept separate from Shaba at night time with her calves, and that's just to allow her to do what she needs to do as a mum, to feed her babies, and to make sure she's getting plenty of food. Being a dominant bull, Shaba is known to be pretty pushy with his food, and if Shaba wants something he will certainly chase the other herd members off that food. So we make sure she gets everything she needs, because producing babies is hard work, and for a giraffe especially it's no easy feat. They are pregnant for 14 months, so it's a very long pregnancy, not the longest in the animal world, but certainly getting pretty close there. And she'll carry that baby for 14 months and then endure a pretty short labour, a couple of hours, to bring that calf into the world. So it's quite a dramatic entrance. These guys are born with their head and neck coming out first, and they drop about 2 meters onto the ground. So it's a bit of a landing to break open that amniotic sac and stimulate breathing. And then they need to find their feet very quickly. These guys are a prey species, so in the wild a giraffe calf that's been born is easy lion food. So mum will obviously be fiercely defending that baby until it's strong enough to be able to move around, find its feet and follow the herd and move quickly. So about 50% of giraffe calves born won't live to their first birthday in the wild, because they are very vulnerable to predators at that age, which is another reason why they need to grow really quickly in that first year of life. So you might see Shaba's long tongue being put to good use at the moment. That tongue is 45 centimeters long and has a blue purple coloration to it. I might see if I can get that tongue a bit closer for you to see. Shaba. Oh, we're too busy eating the lucerne. But the reason that tongue is purple is to prevent any sunburn, because these guys will spend the majority of the day foraging for food, browsing, and using that tongue. It's obviously pretty vulnerable to sunburn. So I'm just holding some of this lovely silver wattle here for Shaba, so you can get that tongue action. He doesn't have the best table manners, our Shaba. We are constantly covered in food when we are feeding him. As any guests who have done giraffe encounters will have had the pleasure of knowing firsthand, it often involves some saliva being dropped onto your head as well. That's all part and parcel of working and feeding a giraffe. So it's very prehensile, very muscular. When giraffe calves are born, they spend a lot of time playing with their tongues, just like human babies do with their hands and their feet, just figuring it all out and building that muscle and dexterity up to be able to eat. Oh, thank you, Shaba. So we're very lucky in Canberra to have so much bush around us. That's where we source all of our regular browse cuttings for these guys. So we have some browse cutters that go out twice a week to find food for them. We offer about 7 different varieties of acacia species for these guys to eat, and we get that delivered fresh to the zoo twice a week for these guys. So they have a superb diet. They're very lucky that our Australian species of acacia don't contain thorns, because in Africa the species that they eat from is primarily covered in thorns, which is another reason why they have that really thick dexterous tongue, and the thick saliva as well, to protect their tongue and their mouth from getting stabbed by those thorns, not horns. So you may notice that they have those ossicones, or those horn-looking structures on the top of their head as well. They are called ossicones. They're not a antler or anything like that from an antelope point of view. Ossicones are actually part of a giraffe's skull. So when a giraffe calf is born, their ossicones are folded flat on top of their head, and they're not fused to the skull. And that's to prevent any injury during birth, both to the calf and mum. And then within a few days, those ossicones will start to rise, and they'll become these little upright structures and eventually fuse solid to that skull. So both males and females have the ossicones. Males are generally more predominant, and they will start to become quite bald and calcified as they age and become a dominant bull. And that's because that's their weapon of choice, essentially, against the giraffes, other male giraffes. So you may have seen plenty of documentaries filming giraffes necking each other, which is when the males will throw their heads and their necks into their opponent's chest. It can make quite a thud, quite a lot of power behind it. And that's the purpose of those ossicones, is to protect that brain underneath the skull from any injury and damage when they perform that. And that's just part of their dominance ranking and figuring out who is the most dominant giraffe in that territory, or the most dominant bull, I should say. Obviously, as young ones start to mature and rise up, they'll take over from an older bull's territory and push him away and have breeding rights with those females. So most females will stick together and nurse their youngs and protect their young as one big group, but they don't have the strongest of social ties. So they're not like an elephant, for example, that is very matriarchal. These guys will rear their young till weaning age, about 1 year to 18 months, and then by that point they'll have another calf on the ground that they need to care for. And depending on the sex of that older calf, that older offspring, they may stick around or they may go looking for their own territory, particularly if they're a male. So Kamisi is our third calf here, born at National Zoo to this pair. His 2 older sisters currently reside in other zoos in Australia, so they were moved out at weaning age, just following that natural dispersal pattern and giving them the opportunity to partake in the breeding program as they mature. So most females will start to breed from around the age of 3 to 4, and they're quite long living, so you'd expect these guys to be living into their early 20s. In a zoo, a little bit less in the wild. It's pretty taxing on your body being a giraffe. There's a lot of pressure on those feet, those joints, when they weigh about 1,000 kilos. And they don't sit down very often to rest their feet and their legs because it's too vulnerable of a position in the wild. So put yourself on the ground and lose that advantage of height, being able to see predators coming nearby. So occasionally you will see our herd all resting if they're feeling nice and comfortable, but mostly the calves will just be the only ones that sit down during the day. And even though we provide them beds, they mostly will stand in their beds, but that's very much giraffe behaviour. They're much more comfortable standing up. You're going to work on that loosen, Shaba? You're going to go for the easy stuff first. Ah, oh, nice kisses, Shabs. So Kamisi has not graced us with his presence, unfortunately. But as we mentioned, he is almost 1 year of age. So if you saw him when he was a baby, you will be very shocked by how quickly he has grown and how much of a grown-up boy he is. So a really important part of being a giraffe keeper and looking after these guys is not only managing their diet, but also making sure that they're in prime condition, both weight-wise, no injuries, and particularly their hooves. So when we work giraffes, we work all the hooved animals in the zoo, and you might be able to see, although they're a little bit muddy at the moment from the rain we've had, the giraffe hooves are even-toed, so they have 2 hooves. So think of it like standing on 2 fingers. So there's a lot of weight and pressure being put into those hooves. So it's really important that we keep a very close eye on their feet, making sure that there's no chips, no cracks, no overgrowth. So we don't want them getting too long and not wearing down like they would naturally. And making sure that their diet is adequate, because diet plays a big role in their hoof care as well. So every morning when these guys are in their barn waiting to go out after we've cleaned their yard and put out their breakfast, we send them through a raceway where we give them their yummiest food, which was that pellet I was mentioning, and we give their feet a clean and just check them over and make sure there's no damage that's occurred overnight, or there's no issues happening with those hooves. And if there is, we're very proactive and make sure we get onto it quite quickly. And that's just because when you're dealing with an animal of this size, it's not easy to, you know, take them to the vet and get the farrier out here or anything like that. So we do all of that kind of treatment ourselves, and we do it very preventatively, so that if there is anything that occurs, we can get onto it very quickly. So the same goes for caring for Mzungu when she's pregnant, and making sure that as we get towards the birth, we're keeping a close eye on that development, looking for those signs that, you know, she's getting closer, that her milk is coming in, that she's comfortable. We can often see and even feel the babies kicking inside her as she gets towards the last month or so. So that's pretty exciting. And we have CCTV footage set up in the barn when we have those births that we know are coming, so that we can monitor her closely overnight and just make sure that we're aware if she's in labour, and make sure it all happens the way it should be. And she's an excellent mum. She's reared 3 calves now, so she knows exactly what she's doing. And Shaba's a really good dad as well. He's very protective of his calves, particularly his daughters. We have noticed since having his first son that he does treat him a little bit differently, and there's definitely been some interesting behaviours we've noticed him exploring with Kamisi, and we think he's teaching him how to neck, and there's a lot of neck interaction that happens between the 2 of them, which is really good to see. Okay guys, well thank you for joining us at our lunch feed today. We hope you've enjoyed a little slice of what's happening here at National Zoo during lockdown. Keep joining us for our regular Facebook Keeper Talks and updates on social media. We do miss you all, and hopefully we get to see you here at the zoo again soon.